Hey everyone, welcome to my coverage of the 2021 Tata Steel Masters tournament. So this tournament was my favorite super tournament till date. It was very exciting, especially the playoffs in the end and all the drama. So I'd like to share with you 4 games that I found the most interesting from this tournament. The first one, a game that everyone had their eyes on, Carlson versus Ferreja on the first round. So Carlsen opened up with d4, knight f6, c4, e6, knight f3, d5, knight c3, knight bd7, and bishop g5, h6, bishop h4, bishop e7. Carlsen traded the bishops, e4, trades the knights, c5, castles first, bishop d3, c5, castles, trades on d4, and we reach a familiar structure to a semi-Taric defense, except that black already has played h6 and knight d7. So black has a slightly better version of the semi-Taric. b6 to develop the bishop, a4, bishop b7, a5. And the threat here is to go a6 and disrupt black's black's pieces a bit. So Ferreja took that, rook takes, knight f6, attacking the e4 pawn, rook e1, rook d8, queen a1, putting pressure on the a7 pawn, and a nice move by Ferreja, rook c7. So Carlsen is ill advised to take this pawn because after the trade, rook c8, queen c5 is the only move to retreat with the queen. Trades rook c8 and black will win back one of the pawns with the drawn ending. So instead, Carlsen plays h3, a nice waiting move, giving the king a flight square. a6, and if you take that, d4 pawn dropped. U4 pawn drops. So rook c5, queen f4, rook e5. Now Carlsen sets a little trap. That's not the only purpose of the move, but it's something that exists. If a random move like king h8, then would come g3, queen takes f3, and rook e3, trapping the queen. So instead, Ferreja plays knight d7, attacking the rook. Rook a5, knight f6. Ferreja is happy with the draw, but Carlsen goes for a thematic pawn sacrifice, d5. After e takes d5, e5, and knight e4, and queen d4, Carlsen obtains a nice bind on the position, and this pawn on d5 actually hurts black more than it helps him because his pieces are now very inactive. Rook c8 by Ferreja, rook a1, a5, rook b1, attacking the bishop, bishop c6, e6. So a second pawn sacrifice. Carlsen really wanted to win this game. This one frees up the square on e5 for the knight. Queen f6, f3, knight g5, and rook b6. Bishop e8, and queen e3. So Carlsen is putting a lot of pressure on Ferreja, even though he's 2 pawns down. The position remains around even. Ferreja plays a4, which is an alright move. Knight g4, queen d8, and here comes a nice move by Carlsen. Rook takes e6. Now this move doesn't win. Ferreja's best try here was a3 to try to divert white's pieces to the tension of this pawn promoting. Ferreja took this, which is fine, but here he had to be extremely precise.
Check.
And after queen takes, he made the fatal mistake of the game, bishop f7. He had to go king h8 and find some ridiculous resources. It's also worth mentioning he was very short on time. After knight takes h6, for example, he had to find bishop h5, which is just such a ludicrous move. So, in view of that, he plays bishop f7, which looks so natural. But here comes white's move. White to play and win. Be free to try to find it. It's knight takes h6 check. After g takes, queen takes. Black is just getting mated, and the game is over. And it concluded with queen c7. Couple checks. And queen h6. And on move 40, Ferreja resigned the game. So the up-and-coming rising star from Iran, it's not yet his time to start beating or, and drawing the world. Well, he has drawn, but not his time to start beating at least the world champion. The second game I'd like to show you is Taric versus Ferreja. This game was a Caruana, which has been Ferreja's main weapon for a lot of time now. Bishop f5, knight f3, bishop e2, which is the short system or the slow system. popularized by Nigel Short. So a typical development from both sides at 91. This is a nice move. The point is to go to d3 sometimes. Also, it's threatening to trap the bishop, and also sometimes white wants to go f4. So h5 stops the bishop from getting trapped, and this pawn cannot be taken because there would be queen h4 with an x-ray on the pawn on h2. So bishop e3 from Taric, queen b6 attacking b2, b3, f6, starting to disrupt white's center. And Taric here goes for a very aggressive sequence. He goes bishop takes h5, f takes e5. So white's center is collapsing, but he goes g4, which is a very, very ambitious move, weakening his king side a lot. And here Ferreja goes for a move that I just love. Rook takes h5. Beautiful exchange sacrifice. He gets his knight playing after de,
check,
knight h3 check, king g2, c5. And now he's got a beautiful knight on h3, supported by the bishop. Those pieces are not going anywhere. None of them can be kicked away from there. And if he can get more pieces to attack white's king, he will have a very promising position. f4, queen c6 threatening a discovery, knight f3, long castles, knight d2. Here both players develop for a bit, rook c1, and eventually comes d4. I must say I love Ferreja's style. It's so aggressive and dynamic. Knight d5 attacks f4. Knight c4, he takes the pawn.
check,
King g1 and bishop g4. So this knight for a lot of moves now will be always a target, and it can never move because there is a mate looming on g2. So rook c3, landing some support. Rook takes d4. Again, the knight cannot take the rook.
check,
Knight d6 check was a nice try by Tari. King b8, queen e3, and bishop g5 by Ferreja. Perhaps not the best move, but still there is a lot of pressure in the position. Rook takes c5 was a very big mistake, because after it takes, Tari cannot take on d4 because there is a double check. So, and he can also he can't take with the knight because there would be knight h3 check and the queen on e3 hangs. So he takes the bishop on g5, but now there is a beautiful move that I would love to say I found, but obviously Stockfish found it. It's a beautiful move that wins the game. It's bishop e2. Unfortunately, not played in the game. The idea is that if this rook goes somewhere random, like a1, there is rook d1 check, and next we take the hanging queen on e3. If the rook takes the knight, similarly, there's rook d1 check, and we take the queen. Our threat is simply to take the rook on the next move. So what does white do? If rook e1, which looks like the most natural move, then there is this beautiful sequence: rook d1, 2 exclamation marks. And if queen takes queen, rook takes rook check, king f2, and knight d3 check. A beautiful display of piece coordination that reminds me of Fischer's Game of the Century against Donald Byrne, where the minor pieces just coordinate so harmoniously. Here black would be completely winning, full rook up. But instead Ferreja plays knight d2 check, which just leaves the game to withdraw. And I know that's not a very easy thing to understand at first, nor at second or at third. But yeah, after king g2, both players agreed to a draw. A possible continuation, probably forced, would be this sequence that I won't even bother explaining because it is too complex. But in the end, the queens would get traded, and this would be a drawn ending. So now let's move on to Niels versus Maxim Vashilogrov. So this is a game that I loved. As you can see there by the little numbers, Niels was able to overcome Maxim. So the underdog won, which is also always something we love to see. This game was a Najdorf, Maxim's specialty, and we had a poison pawn variation. So in this variation, white gives away the b2 pawn, but gets a lot of activity, as you'll see. This is all theory. Bishop c4. Up until this point, everything had been played. Here, bishop f5 or bishop c4 were still moves that had been played before, but bishop b3, as far as I know, was a novelty by Niels. Rook c8, castles, knight takes b3, rook takes, queen c5, bishop e3, queen c4, and rook f4. So here's a semi-critical position. Maxim could have gone for a draw with the move knight h5, and after rook f1, knight f6, attacking this pawn, and the game would be most likely concluded in a draw. Maxim wanted more, and he plays queen e6, which is not a very good move at all. Now, the knight is not attacked by both pieces, so Niels took on b7, castles. h3, rook b8, rook a7, rook a8. Maxim has to try to get this rook out of the 7th rank, as rooks on the 7th, as you may know, are very dangerous. He jumps in with a knight, rook b8, c4, getting a nice clamp on the center, lending support to the knight. Bishop d8, queen f2, the queen is transferring over to the king side. Knight d7, bishop d4, bishop g5, rook f5, bishop h6, king h2, getting out of the first rank, avoiding any checks. Rook c8 and queen g3, so putting a lot of pressure in black's position. g6 and queen h4 was the first of a sequence of 3 beautiful moves by Niels. Now this rook cannot be taken because there is e takes f5, and against any move there is a double check. For example, queen e8,
check.
Double check, and we take the rook, and then take the bishop, and this is completely winning. So Maxim plays bishop f8, and now rook f6, another great move. The ideas are very similar. If knight takes rook,
check.
Knight takes, king f7,
check.
Queen takes h7, check. The king is getting mated. If bishop g7, knight g4, and through
check.
a sequence of only
check.
moves,
check.
we reach
check.
a completely winning ending for white, because he is up 2 pawns. So Maxim once again declined, goes queen e8, and now comes a sacrifice that he couldn't decline.
Check.
Rook takes f8, check. So this rook sacrificed itself 3 times in a row. It was winning in all variations. Queen takes f8 is played, knight e7. Niels took on c8, and this was the final move of the game. Here Maxim resigned in view of queen takes c8.
Check.
And similarly,
check.
Niels just breaks open his king and takes all the pawns around it. So a great victory by Niels. And one of the many underdog wins we had this tournament. Now, this is a game from the 8th round of Pinko versus Carlsen. Pinko, I should tell you, became a super jam this tournament, which is an unofficial title that you get once you cross 2700. And he's only 18 years old, so that's very impressive. This game was also an Eidorf, since Carlsen had drawn all his 6 previous games and was desperate to win a game. So bishop e2, e6, bishop e3, and Pinko goes g4, very aggressive setup. b5, g5, knight d7, and a3. So already a pawn sacrifice on g5. This was all Pinko's preparation, but it was a very interesting concept. The bishop took on g5, queen d2, we concentrated the bishops and went queen h4, which was not a good move. The point is to go g5 and queen f4, which already looks very strange, but it is a decent idea. So Pinko goes rook g1 before castling, not allowing that. g6, castles, and queen e7. So by moving the queen twice in the opening, Carlsen basically admits that this idea wasn't too great. f4, bishop b7, king b1, getting out of this diagonal that often gets open in the Sicilian. Knight c6, and here this was a blunder, even though it looks such a natural move. Here, white to move and win. What did Pinko play? He played knight takes c6. Now Carlsen has nothing better to do than what he did. He took the knight, and after trades, there's this beautiful move queen c3 with a double attack. So Carlsen had to give up his bishop on c6, and now these pawns are dropping, and Pinko is going to win some pawns here. So he takes on d5, rook c8, d6 was a good move, getting this pawn to a very dangerous position. Queen d8, queen takes b5, rook b8, and queen c4. With a very strong idea in mind, after rook takes a3, queen c7 was a very good move. Black cannot afford to trade queens because he would be losing in the ending. Actually, here he would be losing material straight away. So he needs to go to this very passive position to defend the knight. And now comes rook g5, rook a5. For the next couple moves, Pinko tries to trade a pair of rooks to extinguish Black's attack. Here, Carlson tries a little trap. If queen takes knight, rook takes b3 would win the game for Black. So rook a8 makes sure that this rook doesn't get anywhere. That's traded. Queen f5, trying to take on b3 yet again. King b2, rook b5, and Pinko took the knight without any fear. Queen takes f4, queen e8 check, and d7 was the final move of the game, as Carlsen's checks are going to run out after c3 and rook c2, getting this nice little barrier around the king. And next, promoting. So, a beautiful game by Pinko. A really good display of, nerves. He was paired up against the world champion and he held his own. Not only to draw, but to win the game. So, huge congratulations to him. Now I'd like to show you a picture of the final standings of the podium. Here you can see Jordan van Foreest, which unfortunately we didn't cover any of his games in this video. He won the tournament. Anish Giri came second, so to his left, and Pinko came third, to his right. As you can see, players in general are very cheerful and joyous of this moment. With that, I'd like to conclude today's video. I hope you enjoyed, and be sure to leave any suggestions of games in the comments. Thank you. Peace out.